Well, I do want to welcome all of you here to this third session of The Pastor's Moving Now What? And you're either here because you're a pastor who has a change coming, or you're a church leader and your church is about to experience a change. And so you be a part of helping that process to go well. And so thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to do this. And hopefully this will be of value to you. My name is Morris Mathis. I have the privilege of being the Director of Clergy Excellence for the Texas Annual Conference. There's some other gifted leaders that you're going to meet in just a few moments. I've been a Methodist preacher now for 30, 30 some odd years, and I'll get the hang of it one of these days. And I grew up a preacher's kid, a PK, except it's not PK anymore. Now it's TO. TO stands for theological offspring. It means the same thing. It just sounds much more sophisticated to say it that way. And when I was a kid, and we would change churches every time we would do it. We would get into the car to drive to the next church, and my brothers and I would notice our mom would just cry and cry and cry all the way to that new parsonage. And so we'd be at that church for a while, and then time would come to move again, and we'd get in the car to drive to the new parsonage, and mom would cry and cry and cry all the way to that new parsonage. And what mom was teaching us was a couple of things, not the least of which is these transitions are hard. They're hard on the clergy person, they're hard on the family, and also they're hard for the church. And so what we hope is that some of the things we'll talk about tonight will be helpful to each of you from your perspective in making these transitions well. But the other thing that she taught us was that because she would cry going from one church to the next, and then the church after that, was that as hard as it is to go to that new church, awesome things pretty much will always happen if we are open to the leading of God's Spirit, and if we're aware of the fact that God is already there waiting for us and ready to move in the midst of that new mission field. And I hope that all of you, as you enter into these times of transition, that you're doing so with that kind sense of expectation, and that is that God is in the midst of this, and that God is preparing for everybody involved in it some really awesome things. And so anyway. Let me kind of show you what's going to happen tonight. So let me just pull that slideshow up. And first of all, tonight you're going to hear from, there we go. First, you're going to hear from the Reverend Deborah Hallbalt, the Associate Director of the Center for Clergy Excellence, and she's going to talk about saying hello and goodbye really well. And she's also going to talk about benefits from the perspective of salary sheets and some things like that. She is the expert on that topic and can answer your every question about all of that. So then you're going to hear from Nancy Slade, the administrative assistant, who's really kind of the hub of the whole operation for the Center for Clergy Excellence, and the Reverend Brenda Porter, who is our move coordinator. She's a very important person for those who are physically moving, pastors who are physically moving from one house to the next. And when you hear her speak, you will know that she's the one who brings class to our little organization. And then you're going to hear from this guy, and I'll be talking a little bit about the 90-day plan and ethics, the ethics that are involved in a clergy transition. So that's kind of what's going to happen tonight, and through it all, we'll have some time for Q&A for any questions that you may have about each presentation. Our expectation is that we'll be done no later than 8:30. And if it's before that, I've never had anybody, come out and complain that the sermon was too short. And so if we get done before that, I suspect that'll be fine with you. So before I turn things over to Deborah, oh yeah, I might want to suggest to you, if you have your computer on Zoom on gallery view, I may want to suggest to you that you go to speaker view, and that option is in the upper right hand corner of your screen, where it should say view, and just put it on speaker view, and that way you'll have a better look at the person who's presenting. So let's just bow for a word of prayer and we'll get going. God, we do give you thanks for this time to be together this evening. I give you thanks for each of the churches that is represented here. And I ask, oh God, that you would just bless them as they each fulfill their roles and seek to lead well in their respective mission fields. And that this would really become a time in which you are glorified even in this time of transition. And I just pray, God, you be with us tonight, and that this would be a time that when it's over, we will all agree that it was well spent for the work of the kingdom. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So with all of that, I'll now turn things over to the Reverend Deborah Hubalt.
Thank you, Boris. I'm going to share my screen and get up here to this one and go through this, because my portion of it is on saying hello and goodbye well. And I wanted to start by reminding us of a scripture that we all know, and it is found in Genesis 12, 1 through 8. It's the story of the call of Abram. If you remember, Abram was living in Ur, and he was called by God, and God said, I want you to go. You're going to be blessed, to be a blessing, and I'll let you know when you get there. And so Abram set out and followed where God told him to go when he went to the land of Canaan. And he set out not having any idea where it is that God was going to take him, just trusting that God would take him there. And I think about that because that's how it feels sometimes as a pastor when you're called to go to the next place. Or to your first place, if this is your first appointment out of seminary. And like Abram, you're going in obedience to God, because we believe that God definitely works in and through the cabinet and the bishop, and that these appointments are prayerfully made. But you're going to a place like Abram that you probably have never been before. And you're going to a land that has customs already in place, that has people already in place. They have their way of doing things. But unlike Abram, you are going to a people who worship the same God that you worship, that are gathered together under the name of Jesus Christ. And that makes all the difference. And so it's not a completely unknown place, but it is that sense of going where you're sent in the United Methodist Church. There are some things that we assume when we think about pastors itinerating, leaving. One is, as I said before in the story of Abram, that God is at work. We trust and assume that in the work of each of the appointments in the churches, on the church's behalf, on the pastor's behalf, that God is at work, always working to expand God's kingdom. We also assume and understand that grief is natural. Grief is natural for the congregation that is saying goodbye to a pastor. No matter how long they've been there, there are people in that church that have grown close to that pastor, who have gotten accustomed to him. That pastor has officiated at funerals and weddings and communion and baptisms, and you're close. And so there's grief in that. But not only for the congregation, but grief is natural for the pastor, and the pastor's family. As Morris talked about how his mom cried in between every time they would go to leave one place to go to the next, that it was a time of sadness. And each of the times that I've moved, from the very first student appointment when I was at Holy Covenant Katy to A&M Methodist to Texas City to Deer Park to Atascocita, each time there was a piece of me that was really sad because I had grown close to those people. And honestly, I feel like if there's not some grief when a pastor leaves, you maybe haven't invested yourself very strongly in those people, because you're leaving a piece of yourself there. So grief is natural for both the congregation, for the pastor, and for the pastor's family. But so is celebration. You know, there is some level of excitement at the thought of what might be coming that is new. Again, it's on the part of the congregation. It's this mixed bag of feeling of grief and celebration. Because something new is around the corner, someone new. And celebration is natural for the pastor. There's something new, you know, even as you're in the midst of grief on saying goodbye on one hand, there's a level of excitement, of celebration, that God is calling you to something new. And same for the family. Sometimes, you know, for the family, the ratio of grief and celebration is different, because the family may have gotten so embedded in the life of the church and in children in Sunday school and all those kind of things that right at that moment they're feeling more grief than celebration. But it is both. It's both a time of grief and a time of celebration. We need to honor that on behalf of the church and the pastor and the family, and we need to allow space for that in each of those settings as well. Finally, we assume, and that's why we do this particular seminar and ones like it, that good transitions really matter. That a transition of pastors in a church at its best is a really good handoff. It makes me think of back in my days of running track in high school. I was on, at that time it was called a mile relay. Now it's in meters and that's all lost. But I ran the 400, the 440, and ran around the track once. And my leg of it was to receive the baton from the person who was in front of me, and then to hand it to the person that I ran up behind. And just as a successful handoff of the baton is important and when you're in a relay race, so it is that transitions matter in a time of pastoral transition. For many pastors, it's both handing off to someone else and picking up from another person. If you're retiring, that's not true. If it's your first appointment, that's not true. It's just a one-way handoff. But in every other instance, you're trying to do two handoffs almost simultaneously. And a good transition is one that glorifies God and makes the congregation, helps it to be healthy, helps the pastor and the family to be as healthy as they can be as well. Transitions truly matter. And so it is that we spend this time to talk about ways to make the transition work. And we have a place for that on our website. So there's this seminar, but I'm going to walk you through on our website. Let me pull that up. And on the conference website, which is www.txcumc.org, I'll actually even start it at the home page so you can see how we get to where we're going. So you go to txcumc.org, you go to clergy, And then you look over here and you see relocation information. And when you click on that, you get this page that's called itinerary and relocation. All the different things that we're going to be talking about tonight, we're giving you, I would call it like the tasting view of all of these things. There's so much depth and so many great resources that are on this particular page, and that I really want you to make sure and get familiar with. You'll see as you go through and click, there's the saying goodbye well, and there are resources here for the congregation, right? So there's things for the church that have some great information. And then the best of all is there's checklist on almost all of these. And so you go through and you look at the checklist, and these will help you if you're the church to know how to say goodbye well. Ditto for the clergy. You click on the clergy one, and here's the ethics that Morris is going to be talking about later. But then there's also wonderful information about leaving well, about preparing the way for the person, about what makes that good. And again, a great checklist on that that are important. And then there are some things about the parsonage on that same one. Then there's the saying hello. Again, there's a great checklist. There's 50 ways to welcome your new pastor or associate pastor, a church member or the SPR chair. Go to these and click on them. For the clergy, once again, all kinds of wonderful forms. You see here, there's 19 pages here of information if you're the clergy person to go and to explore on these things. We give a whole special click to parsonages. If you're a church that has a church on parsonage, if you're a clergy person living in a church on important things, and so you want to leave it better than you got it. If you're the clergy person, you want to leave it nice and clean. If you're the church, it's an act of hospitality to make sure that you're making sure that that parsonage is in as good a shape as it can possibly be in between the pastors. And if you're the new pastor, you're going to want to hopefully get to see it if you're able to. Sometimes that's just not possible. But if any chance, if an outgoing pastor is able to allow you to walk through the parsonage, it is a great what it is that you're moving into. But there's some great information on the parsonage. You'll see here the 90-day plan. Morris will be talking about that toward a little bit later in our presentation. Brenda Porter will be talking about this relocation information. The information that she is going to be sharing with you, you'll see it here on the same web page. So you'll want to go back after this presentation and see the things, see the actual copies of what it is that she's talking about. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to talk about some of the benefit issues, the benefit changes when you're changing appointments. And you'll see that those are here as well. And they're written out in much more detail than I'm going to give you tonight. I'm going to give you just a snapshot of that. One of my favorite things on here are the worship resources. And those are wonderful because there's wonderful things in the book of worship for transitions. So you can turn to those pages. But here in this section, again, you'll see there's 19 pages. There's sample worship services. There are orders of farewell. There are orders of hello. There are great rituals. Take and look and use what is helpful to you in this lots and lots of information that we give you. Finally, you'll see the webinar here and after tonight, and once the decision is made which webinar was the best one, where we got the best information, we will post that here, right, Morris? Nod your head. Yeah, we'll put a recording of one of these on here so that those who've missed the 3 that we've done will be able to go here and review this information. Here's the other part that I think is one of the best things on this webpage. And that is a series of videos. There are 3. This one is by our lay leader in the conference, John Esquivel. It's really from his heart to the heart of laity. It is not a long video, but it is one that if you're on SPR or on church council, you're going to want to watch it. You're probably going to want to share it with the rest of SPR because it has some great things about pastoral transitions. And then down here we have two by Mike Bonham, who is clergy, and he's a coach, and he's done lots of work with churches and with pastors and coaching and such. And he does two parts on pastoral transitions. So for clergy families, and for churches, those are these three videos, and they live on the same webpage. So I encourage you to go to, it's txcumc.org/itinerancy, or you can get to it from the home page by clicking clergy and clicking relocation information. All right, so now let me go back over here to my slides. So then just some words from the number of moves that I've made and from the reading that I've done. The first thing you're going to be doing is saying goodbye, though it feels like it's sort of simultaneously. And the best way to make sure that you've got good goodbyes is to plan, whether you're on the church side or on the pastor side. Plan it, think it through. If you're from the pastor side, you may want to think about what are those last 2 or 3 sermons going to be like. How can you say goodbye through the message that you leave them, that leaves them excited at the prospect of what is ahead, that their best days indeed are still ahead. And so you want to plan that. You want to plan in the worship service. Some pastors, the leading pastor will leave a stole on the altar, and then the next pastor picks it up. There's all kinds of ideas of what to do in the worship service to say goodbye well. If you're the church, it's a great time to encourage folks to write notes of appreciation for the pastor. Some of the churches where I've served, they made it super duper easy by, on the last Sunday, encouraging people to bring a note of, maybe where that pastor has touched their life or the life of their family. But then also they've had blank, you just get a box of blank notes and set them out on the table. So on that Sunday morning, people can write a note and drop it in a basket. The pastor or the family can read those later on. You can ask them if they need help in boxes or packing or any of those kind of things. A lot of people are pretty picky about that and may not, but they may. You want to plan those final goodbyes, and then don't forget the family. If there are children in Sunday school, if the spouse is in a small group or in the choir, you want to make sure that you are saying goodbye to that whole family and doing that well. The other part of saying goodbye well is to pay attention to the details. Pastors, make sure that the records are up to date, that the finances of the church are in a strong position. If your last day there is June the 30th, you know what? If at all possible, you ought to have make sure that the church has half of that year's apportionments paid, so that you're not leaving a burden for the next pastor coming in, that you've put a period at the end of yours. And again, for the parsonage, that you have left it better than you found it, that you've got, I usually hired a cleaning service to come in and clean it because I never wanted to do that. I was busy trying to move. So we got everything out and then paid for somebody to come and clean it. And then the church can go in and do whatever they need to do. But you want to pay attention to those details. Make sure you're leaving the records of baptisms and new members and all those kind of things are there. I put this slide in here occasionally just to remind you that, txcumc.org/itinerancy is the place to look for all of these things. Then there's the saying hello well for the SPR and the church first. Some words to them. Plan the hello. It is a big deal. You can start by praying from the moment you hear. You pray for the outgoing pastor and family, but be praying for your new pastor, and if they have a family, to be praying for them as well. Pray for the church to be willing to receive, and just cover all of it in prayer. Plan something special in worship. Again, you can go to the website. There are some great things in there. There are also in the book of worship, if you have one, for some good rituals for saying hello in worship. But make a point of that. If you're gonna do, in the olden days, there was a pounding, so you get a pound of this and a pound of that, and nowadays, what a lot of churches have done, which have been great for my family when they've done it, it's more of a gift card pounding, and so I'm hopefully not stealing Morris's thunder, but because I think you talked about it in one of them, but to do the gift cards. They don't know where the good restaurants are in town. They don't know, who's, I had a person when I moved to my last church that gave me a gift card to her hairdresser. And holy cow. So I've lived in this neighborhood now 7 years and I've never gone anywhere else but to that hairdresser. So that gift card really started a relationship because I trusted the person who sent me there. But you have gift cards potentially. That's one way to do that. Again, you can offer to meet their truck or ask for if they want any help unpacking. Again, a lot of people are pretty picky about that. Plan meetings with the pastor. A lot of pastors, when they come in, now that we're sort of maybe moving a little bit out of COVID, you may be able to actually have some small group settings where the pastor can get to know those folks. Ask the incoming pastor, if you're the SPR chair, make that one of the things that you can ask them. Would you like for me to set up some meetings with you? And if they can't, if your church is not at a place yet where they're doing anything face-to-face, then those can be done virtually. That's what everybody that moved in the last year had to do, was to do all of these by Zoom. But there may be ways to do these. Some people have done goodbye and hellos in the parking lot, but these small groups where a pastor can get to know smaller groups of folks. And then also, again, don't forget the family, if they've got a family with them. More kinds of things for the SPR on the church as you're thinking about the new pastor coming. Make sure that you're giving that incoming pastor things that they can use. Ask them, what would be helpful to you to get to know our church even before they move there? A lot of times churches have given me the pictorial directory. Sometimes they've gone through and circled or at least given me the name of who the elected leaders are, and I could look them up if their picture was in there. A lot of churches, your pictorial directory is very old, but it gives you at least a little bit of something. But any way that you can help that pastor get up to speed more quickly with who those leaders are and who the people of the church are. And then I would pray over those pictorial directories. So it was really a helpful thing when they would give me those. And then, what else would they like? Would they like, any financial records? Would they like, maybe your church has a long history and you have a written history, or your community has a written history. Can you send them those things so that they can begin to get to know your community and your church? This, you shouldn't have to even say this, but make sure the office is clean when the pastor is coming in. These are signs of hospitality on behalf of the church, to just make sure their office is clean, to make sure the parsonage is clean before they walk in. It is a real point of hospitality if you're the church person. Now for the pastor, when you think about saying hello at your new church, first of all, at the church where you're leaving, you always want to speak well of your successor. And when you get to your new church, you want to speak well of your predecessor. We are a covenant community, and we have a variety of gifts, and find ways to lift up the person who's following you. Find ways to lift up the person that you are following, because it is good for the covenant. It is good for the kingdom. And there is truth in that. For the pastor as well, again, pray. I'm sure you started praying from the moment you even thought about you may be having an appointment change this year, but pray specifically for not only the church that you're leaving, but the church that you're going to. If you do get the benefit of having a pictorial directory, it's easier because you can see some faces in that. For some, now we're getting pretty close, but move date isn't until July, the first Sunday in July. So still, if there are some meetings that you could potentially do ahead of time, especially that's one of the benefits of COVID. For a lot of churches, we are in virtual meetings. Our finance, our trustees, our SPR, our staff meetings, some of those are virtual. And so is there a way for you to say, would it be okay? You need to ask the outgoing pastor, would it be okay if I stepped in for 5 minutes at finance and said hi? Or maybe SPR wants to invite you just to say hi ahead of time. Virtual meetings, back when we made the pastoral shift at Atascocita, it was in the fall when we were in the throes of COVID. And Mike Tyson, the person who was following me at Atascocita, he came and met with all the staff. Just came up to the church one day, and he had made appointments with all the staff and got to have just a few minutes with each staff ahead of time, and that was helpful. Same for committees. Some creative pastors, you might ask, would they like for you to do just a, hey, this is who I am, a video that they could play in worship ahead of time. I'm looking forward to being there. This is my son, my daughter, my wife, my husband. We're excited to be coming. You'll be seeing us soon. Be praying for us, and we'll be praying for you. Just something, a snippet that they could play in worship. And I already talked about staff meetings. It may be possible. Again, those making good transitions. The other parts about saying hello are just remembering that you are coming into a new setting, first of all, as a learner. Those folks have customs and ways that they've been doing things, and a rich and wonderful history of their church, of their community, of their families. You're going in as a learner. You're going to have some folks who are going to be saying, tell us your vision for the church before you even know anybody. And a great answer is, right now I'm trying to learn, you guys, and we want to learn each other. You spend time listening as you think about going into a new setting. And then Morris will talk more about the 90-day plan that will also kind of give you some concrete ways to get your feet under you when you go and do that. Again, transitions are important. Saying goodbye well, saying hello well. I encourage you again to go to the website. Everything that I have just sort of flown through there's such rich information on the txcumc.org/itinerancy. So let me pause and ask, are there any questions about this particular piece of the material? Unmute yourself and just speak up, because then I'm going to benefits. Okay. All righty. So there's not a lot to say about benefits, but there are a couple of really important things. And I am not an expert in benefits, no matter what Morris says about that. I'm just the designated person to give these couple of little things. The last slide that I'm going to give you is going to have all the contact information as well. When you go to the website, remember txcumc.org/itinerancy, and you move down to that benefits section, let me just show you, there is a page down here. When you get to benefits issues, there's a lot of pages here, but at the very end of it, you'll see questions, and there's all the contact information for the folks in the benefits area. And they are happy to answer any questions, to walk you through anything that seems to be difficult. So let me just hit on a couple of things that you do have to keep in mind, particularly for the pastors. But if you're in charge of the books or the payroll or anything, or you're a layperson and you're watching this on behalf of your church, you may want to elbow them and let them know that there's some changes coming. First of all, you got to be at least 3/4 time to be eligible for most of the benefits, most of the health, all of the health benefits, and most of the pension benefits. So if your appointment is not 75% or more, then you're not, this little section will just, you can like, I don't know, file your nails or something while I go through this, but not this next part though. So don't start filing your nails yet. But to get eligible, you've got to be at 3/4 or full-time. But every new appointment requires a new salary sheet, no matter if you're part-time or full-time. A new salary sheet must be filled out. And you can call your district office to get the password. The actual salary sheets live on the login page, again, on our webpage. But when you fill that out, you'll have to get with your district office to be able to sign into that. And plus, then they have to certify it. And please, they ask us, please make sure you get that salary sheet done during that first week or two, if you can, when you move there, because you're paid with your previous appointment through the end of June, and you're paid in your new appointment beginning July 1st. And so it's really helpful, the sooner in July that they can have your new salary sheet, the better. The only couple of health benefits thing that you can change, one is if you have the dental HMO, you got 31 days to either find a new provider if you've moved to a different area, or to just ditch the HMO and move to the dental PPO if you're not able to find that provider. But if you're the dental HMO, the dental plan, if you're on the PPO, you don't have to do anything, but on the HMO, you're required to pick a provider. So you'll have to submit new forms and get with group benefits for that. You also can move from the PPO health insurance to the high deductible plan, or vice versa. This is you can't add beneficiaries, or you can't add family members, but you can change between these two. You have 31 days to do that. Your pension benefits, you don't have to change anything on that except your umpip contributions. So that's the contributions that you make yourself to the personal investment plan. And if you are new, if this is your first appointment, let me be the first to tell you, you'll hear it at the residency retreat too, but let me just tell you, it's really important that you contribute to your umpip plan, because the conference has a matching percentage that you will miss out on if you're not also making a contribution. So that's really important to do that. And that doesn't happen at the conference office. That happens through your payroll and directly to Westpath. You will see that here where it says contribution election. You see the Westpath here. This is the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan, and it's got, you go down it and there's the whole form. I think at Westpath, they also have one that you can sit and fill out online. So this is sort of a sample form, but you fill it out, and then you have to take it to your salary paying unit, right? Because they're going to withhold money. It's pre-tax money that they can hold out. So you get a tax break and they send it in. Westpath is who takes care of that for them. And so that that does not follow you. So if you've got it set up where you're at now, you have to reset that up, because that's with Westpath. So hopefully that is clear as mud. So let me stop and ask questions if there's any questions, and remind you that if it's a question I don't know, here are the experts in front of you, and you will want to reach out to any of them. Are there any of those benefit kind of questions?
Mine's not necessarily a benefits question, although I have one of those. Just to let you know, I'm a finance chair, and unfortunately I've had to book a meeting that starts in 15 minutes, so I'll have to leave this. I really appreciate getting the references to the webpage, because that gives me a source to see what I've missed, etc. I don't know how much the overlap is between benefits for pastors and benefits for staff members in general. I assume the focus of this is just for the pastoral change. Does the webpage have the benefits information for non-pastoral staff also?
No, because the conference is not the provider of benefits for anybody except the pastor and families. Those are not taken care of by the conference. So
Thank you.
you bet. Uh-oh. So I'm hoping that you guys still see me because my Zoom is no longer responding. So if you can still hear me, then I'm going to ask Morris for you to take it on because I'm having technical issues now, but I'm done.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Deborah, you may have to just sign off, and because I think your signal's become very weak.
Will do.
Yeah. So, Markley, you had a question. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, my question was, I thought I heard mention of a residency retreat. She was saying that something would be explained or elaborated upon at a residency retreat, but that's not something I had heard of.
Right. So, so there are two ways in which clergy that are just coming in kind of get oriented. For those who are on their way to commissioning, we have something called residency retreat. For those who will be serving as licensed local pastors, we have licensing school, and while the two are very different kinds of experiences, they cover some of the same ground, and so the stuff that she was referring to is covered in both licensing school and residency retreat. So, and Michael, you're just becoming licensed, is that correct?
Yes, I did licensing school, so that's why I didn't know about residency retreat.
Right, that's
Right.
why. That's why. Have you already done licensing school?
Yes, sir, I have.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I thought you had. So, so anyway, so you're good. So no need to sweat about that. You're good.
Excellent.
All right. Any other questions, Deborah? It's good to see you back again. Any other questions from Deborah's presentation? All right, so Nancy, take it away.
Hi there, I'm Nancy Slade. I'm in the Center for Clergy Excellence, and I help people with their moves in terms of getting their move packets out. I think I've gotten most of the clergy's move packets out. Let me know if you haven't gotten one and that you are qualified to get one, number one. But everybody on this call, I will be sending out the information come tomorrow, so you can get the links and things like that. And especially you'll be able to watch this video again if whichever video we pick of the three that we've been holding again. So if you wouldn't mind in the chat down at the bottom of your screen, put in your full name and put in your email. So I've got those. If you just go to the chat and type in your name and your email, then I'll be able to grab that and I'll be able to send that information to you tomorrow.
Nancy,
So
do you also need to know what church they're with? Would that be helpful?
Oh, that would be helpful, right? What church you're with. Thank you. And the specialist in all of our moves and our move policy and things like that is Brenda Porter, and she's going to tell you now about the actual move packages that you've gotten and moving.
Okay. Okay, let me go to my slideshow. Slight technical.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I asked a quick question. How do I invoke the chat? I put the data in, but how do I make it appear in the chat?
Just after you type it, press enter.
Enter. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem.
Okay. Can everyone see my first screen, my first screenshot? Good. As Nancy said, I'm the person who actually coordinates the moves. And it's quite simple. The first thing that'll happen once everything has been signed, sealed, I's dotted, T's crossed, is you should receive a relocation, the clergy should receive a relocation email from Nancy Slade. It'll look something like this. It may have 3 attachments. It may have just the one, the clergy relocation form. You've got the email. The next thing is look at the relocation policy. The policy gets tweaked every year. So even if you've moved before, just make sure that you're aware if there are any changes. Where is the policy? Some of the pastors actually have it attached to their email. Click on it and you can read it. If you get an email like this, then you look further down and you'll see that in the email that Nancy sends, number 1, review the clergy policy. And if you click there, that'll take you to the policy. Further down, the next one is contact the moving companies. And again, you've got the same contact information. Now, maybe you know you're moving, but haven't got the email. You can still do what Deborah was talking about. Go to the conference website, clergy, relocation information, same screen, and the relocation information, you've got a policy there, a sample relocation form, and the moving company contacts. This web page is really, really great as far as resources. Remember, read the policies. That gives you a little timeline too. My main function is to coordinate the paperwork and answer any questions that pastors have. I work out of my home office. The best way to contact me is usually by email, because that way I've got a written record of any questions that people have. You've reviewed the policy. Now you contact a mover and schedule a quote. Nancy recommends doing it as soon as possible. Now, why is that? You're not moving until early end of June, but movers are very, very busy. I was just talking with one of the movers today. They're already completely booked up for May and probably getting booked up for June. So if you've had the email and haven't contacted a mover, contact the mover as soon as possible. They get very busy, and you may find you can't use the one you want to. So often when clergy are moving, there's what I call a domino effect. One clergy is moving out of their parsonage, someone's going to be in after them, and that person is moving from a parsonage, and you get the idea. So it really helps. The sooner you've got your move squared away, it helps everybody in the moving domino. And ideally, once you've got everything approved, you've got your quote and sent it to me, you've got one less thing to plan and more time to get ready. I've been doing this since 2004 when the moving policy came into effect. And sometimes a pastor said, our church doesn't have a parsonage. I need to find somewhere to live. So I haven't done anything. Or I've got to sell my house. The way most moving quotes are done is they know the general area you're moving to. Contact the mover, get them to give you an estimate of how much weight you have. They'll know the mileage and they'll be able to do the quote. You can confirm the final date and the actual street address later. But it's very important to get in touch with the movers as soon as possible so they can at least do their survey. And very often they do it online. So they don't actually have to physically come out. Some pastors, frequently this is the, any retiring pastors want to move early, and that's fine. It can actually help because there's more time for the current church to get ready for the new pastor. Just go ahead, get your quote, and then hopefully you'll be able to get your moving date squared away. Sometimes a pastor has to move after move week. On part A10 of the relocation policy, there's a little bit more information. It's the same procedure. Get your quote, your estimate done, get the move approved, and then sort the date out later. And as always, if you can't find an answer, you can always email me. My contact information is here, and it's on the conference website where the contact information. If you want to move yourself, okay, there's a section in the policy about that. Maybe you have a member of your church who has a moving company and you'd like to use them. That's fine. Just check section F of the relocation policy. Other questions? Look at the policy, and then you can always email me. As before, I prefer an email, that way I've got a written record. Sometimes if people call me, I'm not always where I can make notes. So it's much easier to have a written record from an email when you have a question. So you've got the email, you've checked the policy, you've got the mover contacted, and then you email your clergy relocation form and quote to me, and I will do my approval. I work on relocations most Fridays. So as long as I got your information during the week, then I should be able to approve everything that week, during that week, or if I have any questions, I'll get back with you. But that's my main responsibility, of course, is comparing the quote with what the policy will pay for. It used to be that when clergy moved, or when most people moved, if they were moving for a job change, under most conditions, it was a tax-free benefit. For the last few years, that's not the case. It means that you will be liable for self-employment tax and the marginal tax rate, whatever that is, on your move. So if your move is, say, $4,000, you can very possibly have a $1,600 additional taxes to be paid. So make sure that you've got that money withheld extra. That's just a little bit extra so you don't get the shock at the end of the year. But this is something you'll be getting a 1099 from the conference for when they pay your move. Nancy is doing a great job of checking with pastors as to whether or not they're going to need moving assistance, because in quite a few cases, the pastor may be, especially with retiring pastors, they don't always need to do a physical move. So, but occasionally it happens, you're not going to be moving, so just let me know, and that way I can check that on my Excel schedule. I'm a CPA as well as a pastor, so I have my Excel schedules, and that's what I almost think in Excel, the way I put it sometimes. Okay, you've sent everything in, you've got the approval. With the approval, I send an email to the mover that says we'll pay this much for your move. A copy goes to the pastor, a copy to the new DS, to their office, with a couple of copies to the conference office. But you will know how much is going to be paid for your move. So once you get that, you can finalize the details with your mover. Now it's time to start packing, clearing out, so you're ready to move. And make sure we don't cover more than the basic insurance policy, which is about 60 cents a pound weight. So make sure a lot of insurance policies, if you've got renter's insurance, they will cover moving insurance, but check with that or else it can be purchased from your mover. Reimbursement for the boxes and packing material is also available. Check in the relocation policy and you can see what the parameters are for that. It's up to $550. Moving day is approaching, so confirm the date and time with your company. Make sure everything is ready. If it's not ready, there may be extra packing, which you will be charged for. So and the sooner you can get everything ready, the quicker everything will happen. And that makes it so much easier for the church that you're leaving, because then they can get everything squared away for the new pastor. Have a great, safe move, ready to start that new ministry in your new mission field. Does anyone have any questions for me now?
Any questions for Reverend Porter? All right. I think you dazzled them with your knowledge and your accent, Brenda.
I don't have an accent. Everyone else does.
So, well, great. So I'm going to talk to y'all for a few minutes about the 90-day plan. So let me just do a share screen here. 1 second. And here we go. The 90-day plan. Are y'all seeing that? Everybody seeing that? Somebody nod their head or something. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so so what we know is that, you know, what happens in the earliest days of a new ministry are very important. I have a friend who's a new church developer for another conference who says he knows what the new church is going to make in the first 90 days. And I say that to you not to say that we know exactly how a ministry will go in the first 90 days, but just to say that's how important those first 90 days are, that they really do set a tone for what's going to follow. So bringing intentionality to what happens in those first 90 days is of great benefit to both the clergy person and to the church. So so if I could get the slideshow to advance, that would just be marvelous. There we go. So I selected a couple of cartoons that I liked that had to do with the importance of planning. I selected this one not because I thought it was really funny, but because I liked the name of the guy that created it. And but it does show the importance of planning. This is a picture that I took by a convention center in Tampa Bay. I have no idea what was going on here, but clearly there were planning issues related to the creation of these steps. And what we don't want is for new ministries to find themselves up against a wall because they didn't exercise good planning in the earliest days of the ministry. Why are those first 90 days important? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. So initial impressions matter. What happens in those first 90 days lays the foundation for the future of a ministry. Also, there's just something about the gift of fresh eyes. And so being intentional about using those fresh eyes, I think is really helpful to a ministry. You know, a new person, and in this case, or in the case of clergy transition, a new pastor walks around a building and sees things in the building that folks who've been there for years stopped noticing years ago. And the same is true of a ministry. And so really being intentional about utilizing those fresh eyes can be of great benefit to a church's ministry. It's also the gift of fresh ideas that can be generated during the earliest days of a ministry. And then finally, the gift of fresh energy. And so that's what we want to bring to bear, all of these things in these first 90 days. So we've created this action plan for transitioning clergy. Now, one of the things that it's important that all of you are aware of, both lay and clergy, is that last year the cabinet decided to create new assessment tools for all of our clergy's annual assessment. One of the things we talked about was the difficulty of doing assessments for clergy in the fall of the year for clergy that had just moved to a new church in July. And so what we decided was that rather than go through another year where we have all kinds of SPRs and clergy saying, hey, we don't know what to put on this assessment because the pastor hadn't been here long enough. We decided to use the 90-day plan as the assessment tool for that new clergy person and new SPR to use. And just for that first year, after that, they use the regular assessment tool. So it's very important that that everybody begin paying attention to this 90-day plan early on, because it'll form the basis for the assessment of the new pastor that will take place in the fall. So so this basically is sort of how it unfolds. First of all, what we say is that really preparing for the 90-day plan, that work is really already beginning. I mean, like right now. We call that laying the groundwork for a smooth transition. And so what I want to do now is, almost forgot, what I want to do now is I want to switch you to our website that you've seen any number of times. And I'm going to go to it. And so let me share the screen. And here we go. So here we are again. We're at our website once again, and I went to clergy, clicked on relocation, and then we're at this page, and I'm going to click on 90-day plan. And so this is what you're going to see on the website for the 90-day plan. So can y'all, let's see, Brenda or Nancy, I can see your faces. Can you see the action plan for transitioning clergy? Okay, very good. So, so what we say is that really preparing for the 90-day plan, that work is beginning now. First, you have come to this webinar, so that'll help you get ready. The second thing is you can start working on all of the kinds of things that Deborah talked about in her presentation. If you have any need for any, if you have trouble finding stuff or whatever, reach out to Nancy. She'll help you find it. Okay, so what happens in the 90-day action plan? Well, first of all, it's divided into 3 segments of 30 days each. So the idea is month of July, month of September, month of August, month of September is the 90-day period we're talking about for a July 1 start. If your date's different, then you adjust to that. What you do is you work up your plan, and then once you have your plan ready, you send it to your district superintendent, and then your DS says, yeah, this looks good, or maybe make some suggestions. I suggest as clergy persons, you work with your leadership in creating this plan, so that everybody has some ownership in it. And so you create the 90-day plan, send that to the DS, so the DS says, yep, this looks good. The idea being that at the end of it, you'll be submitting a final report to the district superintendent that will form the basis of the clergy assessment. So first 30 days, we think of this as learning and building personal credibility. So what are the first 30-day priorities? So what we have given you is some suggestions of what needs to be accomplished in those first 30 days. It's pretty basic stuff. Get settled in the office. What do you got to do to help the family get transitioned? But it's also about having conversations with leadership about the church and about the community. Hopefully, you know about Mission Insight, which is a powerful demographic tool that can give you more information than you can ever begin to use to teach you about your dynamic mission field. If you don't know how to use Mission Insight, contact your district office. If your district office can't help you, contact Nancy and we'll get you hooked up with Mission Insight. Talk with leaders about the state of the church, start building relationships with key people. So these are just some suggested goals. And if you want some help in establishing some goals, we also have included a link on to help you think about developing SMART goals. For definitions and examples, we ripped this off from Indeed.com. So you may want to take a look at that. So all of these goals are just suggestions. You don't necessarily have to do every one of them. You tailor this to kind of fit your own situation. And then there's a place where if you think of some other stuff that you want to do, you can add that. And then think about what's the earliest success that I want to see in those first 30 days? And you describe that and you work toward accomplishing it. Okay, so that's the first 30 days. Second 30 days, seeking some early wins. And again, we got some priority suggestions for you. First, how did I do in the first 30 days? How did that work out? Then you're thinking about your leadership, whether it's lay or volunteers or paid staff, and thinking about as clergy persons, how are you going to lead them? Analyze your early judgments about the congregation. You can see all of these. Again, these are just suggestions. You may have others that you want to add, and we don't necessarily expect you to do all of these. And then what are the early successes that you want to see happen in that second 30 days? And then the third 30 days, refine, identify, develop, and assess. So you're going through the same procedure for the third 30 days. You're assessing your first 60 days. How's it all going? And then you're having, what this imagines is that you're having deep conversations with leaders about finances and thinking about where you are financially and where you need to get to financially, and thinking about goals that the church will address. So again, just look through all of these and think about what makes sense for you and your situation, and then what's the early successes that are desired. So that's a description of the 90-day plan. And here's some of the tools that I mentioned to you. Mission Insight, which is a great demographic tool. You can also get a lot of data off of Ezra at the website. And then if you want to know how to do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we gave you a link for a YouTube presentation on that. So when you get to the end of the 90-day action plan, then what happens is we're thinking the pastor will answer these questions for the DS. How well are you adjusting to this new ministry setting? What did you learn about the church during the first 90 days? What strengths and opportunities for ministry have you observed? What growth areas and challenges for ministry have you observed? And then what are your short-term and long-term leadership priorities? And then the SPR answers these questions. How well is the church adjusting to the new pastor? What did you learn about the pastor? And then what strengths from ministry have you observed in your new pastor? What growth areas have you observed? And then how can you best support your pastor, both in the short term and the long term? So our hope is that by using the 90-day plan in this way, that it'll help you to just get dialed in to one another as clergy and as lay, and form a good basis for conversations with the DS in the fall about how things are going. Anybody have any questions about the 90-day plan, or did I just describe it so well that nobody can have any questions at all? Any questions at all? Anybody there at all? No, I'm joking. So,
Hey,
all right.
I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah. No, yeah. Do you have a question, or you just wanted to make me feel
No,
better?
I don't have any questions. I'm very excited about the 90-day plan, and I'm currently working on mine, even though I am 9 days into my appointment. So I'm still working on it.
Yeah. Excellent. So, well, I think this approach for doing assessments is good, and I think emphasizing the 90-day plan is good. So, okay, just very quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about pastoral ethics in moving, and so I'm just going to share this right here. So as I mentioned at the beginning, my dad was a pastor, and Dad used to tell this story about being at a church, and Dad was beloved because Dad was great. And so there was this woman in his church who always used to say, "Oh, Brother Mathis, you have saved our church." And he just loved to hear her say that every time she would say it. So Dad moved on, as Methodist preachers will do, and some time passed, and Dad got invited back to do a revival because Dad was a really great preacher. And so Dad got invited back to do a revival. And so he came back, and he was excited about seeing folks again. And he was excited about seeing that lady, and wondered, what she would say to him. And so Dad saw her, and, she came up to him and greeted him. And as they were talking, she said, "Oh, Brother Mathis, we love our new pastor. He has saved our church." And Dad was just crestfallen to discover that he, in fact, was not the Messiah that had saved their church. And I tell that story in this context to talk about pastoral ethics, because what I like about it is that the only reason that woman was able to make that transition from having that feeling about my dad to then having that feeling about the person that became her new pastor is because the things were done that needed to be done to allow that to happen. And so a whole lot of pastoral ethics has to do with the pastor who is leaving, letting go well of that former church, as much as the pastor loves the people in that church and loved being in that church, letting go well. And then also doing everything that we can as leaders to help the members of that church understand that they have to let go of their former pastor as their pastor. And it doesn't mean necessarily that, all relationships have to be cut off. You can have no contact whatsoever. Because I have to confess, that's not how I've done it. I'm just being honest. There have been people in every church, virtually every church that I've served, that we've maintained contact with through the years, but we understand that their relationship has changed. I'm no longer their pastor. And we relate to one another in that way as friends. And fortunately, these are all people who have the personal and spiritual maturity to understand those new boundaries, and that we relate to one another in ways that respect those boundaries. So changing roles in pastoral transitions and helping folks understand that those roles have changed is crucial in making those transitions well. Also, there is the issue of making contact, and so and there's the whole thing about, oh, we want our pastor to come back to do the wedding, to do the funeral, do the baptism. There's the issue about when somebody from the church goes into the hospital and making pastoral visits. There's the issue of former pastors injecting themselves into issues that can arise in a church, or obviously issues that can arise when a former pastor criticizes their successor, as Deborah mentioned. And again, we got to respect those boundaries, so that when a former pastor is invited to come back, say to do a wedding, the best response from that pastor is, you know what, I'll be happy to be there to celebrate with you. But you have a new pastor now. I will confess to you, funerals I think are more difficult because the needs and the desires of the family related to a funeral are, I think, more tender at that moment than any other time. And so I think that's more difficult, but certainly that former pastor would not come back to do that funeral without the leadership of the host pastor being, deeply involved in ministering to that family, and perhaps that former pastor would just perform an ancillary role. As I said before, I think if there's the ability to maintain boundaries, friendships can happen when a former pastor wants to, and a former church member want to continue to be in relationship. Those things can happen, but it's just really about creating those spaces, those boundaries, so this can be done in a healthy way. So I suspect that that's pretty clear to everybody, but any questions, comments, thoughts about that anybody would want to make? Well, friends, that's pretty much all we got. And so that's our little song and dance. So hopefully there's been something about this that's been a little bit helpful to you. So thank you again for coming. God bless you in these days of transition.
Thank you all. Appreciate all you do.
All righty. Bye-bye.